It's on WNYC. More just ahead. Marketplace is next. Tonight on the show, the pandemic put a spotlight on the lack of broadband access in tribal lands. In response, the government invested billions into closing that gap.
Don't let a good emergency go to waste, right? I don't know that we would have gotten the foundational dollars had COVID not happened.
Now the issue is finding materials and labor for the job. That's next on Marketplace. We'll have more All Things Considered at 7 o'clock. Warm night in New York City at 6:30.
WNYC is supported by the Town Hall presenting Brazilian singer Ney Matogrosso, Unplugged with pianist Leandro Braga, and guest Fado singer Marisa. Friday, April 21st at 8 p.m. Tickets at thetownhall.org and Ticketmaster.com.
WNYC, independent journalism in the public interest. 93.9 FM and AM 820. NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by VantageScore. VantageScore's credit scoring models help expand financial inclusion by leveraging predictive analytics at VantageScore.com.
We talk a lot about how fast prices are going up, but maybe what really matters is how fast wages are going up. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Fidelity. A dedicated Fidelity advisor can help create a wealth plan for a full financial picture. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
In Washington, D.C., I'm Kimberly Adams in for Kai Rizdal. It's Thursday, April 6th. Good to have you with us. It's been almost a month since the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, and since then, much of the federal government's response has focused on banks' liquidity, ensuring that other banks have enough cash on hand if depositors want to withdraw their money. But the crisis also has the industry concerned about the other side of a bank's balance sheet. Loans. Marketplace's Justin Ho reports that we're starting to see some signs banks are pulling back on lending.
Late last month, the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas surveyed 71 banks in its district, and it found that loan volume fell for consumer loans, mortgages, and commercial real estate loans.
I do think that it is a sign of the beginning of tightening credit standards.
That's Mayra Rodriguez Valladares at MRV Associates. She says some banks are thinking twice about lending out money since bank deposits have been falling.
It's just making all banks nervous about their own liquidity, meaning their ability to meet all obligations when they come due, including depositors wanting to withdraw money.
If lending were to dry up and people can't get the loans they need, that'd be a disaster for the economy. But Karen Petru at Federal Financial Analytics says that's not what's happening now. For one, falling loan volume is also a sign that people just don't want loans at today's interest rates.
You certainly see that in mortgages, for example, where fewer and fewer people can afford to get a mortgage.
And Petru says there are still plenty of willing lenders for anyone who does want to borrow, like a big corporation, for instance.
We're also seeing continuing credit available even in some of the higher risk sectors. The cost of borrowing is higher, but the money is there.
Lenders aren't only worried about the recent bank failures. Ishwar Prasad at Cornell University says banks are concerned about the prospect of a recession.
Banks are also anticipating that the months and quarters ahead are going to be a little rocky for the U.S. economy, so they're certainly going to be much more circumspect.
Economists surveyed by the American Bankers Association say they expect banks to tighten credit standards throughout the year as the economy and credit quality get worse. I'm Justin Ho for Marketplace.
Wall Street today, markets were a little jittery about unemployment numbers. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. We found out today fewer Americans are filing claims for unemployment insurance, also known as jobless claims. 228,000 people for the week ending April 1st. Also on its way down, is the pace of wage increases in this economy. Payroll processor ADP reported yesterday that pay growth for private sector workers decelerated in March, both for workers who stayed in their jobs and for those who quit to take new ones. Economists expect a similar story in tomorrow's jobs report. In general, this slowdown in wage increases is something the Fed will welcome in its efforts to tamp down on price increases. But rising wages are the very thing helping workers keep up with rising prices. Marketplace's Mitchell Hartman reports.
What level of wage growth does the Fed want right now? Well, the goal for price inflation is around 2%. The standard formula for target wage growth, says Elise Gould at the Economic Policy Institute, is that you add
long-term productivity growth, that's about 1.5%. So anything in the 3.5% range is certainly not going to be driving inflation.
Some workers have been getting much bigger raises recently. Gould's been crunching the numbers for the lowest paid 10% of workers, many of whom are service workers who've been in high demand for the past couple years.
Those lower wage workers saw faster wage growth, about 9% between 2019 and 2022, much faster than at the middle of the wage distribution.
As wage growth slows, it's likely to hit workers up and down the income ladder. But even many workers who get raises are likely to lose ground as the economy slows. Dave Gilbertson tracks how many hourly workers punch in for how long at payroll processor UKG, which is a marketplace underwriter.
People are working less overtime, working fewer shifts per week.
Gilbertson says employers are facing slackening demand, higher interest rates, and economic uncertainty.
Companies are broadly trying to manage their labor spend, recognizing that there have been elevated wages over the last couple of years now. One way to manage is to allow fewer hours for workers. Over a couple months, I think employees are going to be in a tighter spot financially.
Less money in people's paychecks will tend to help the Fed fight inflation, just hopefully without making consumers pull back so much it tips the economy into recession. I'm Mitchell Hartman for Marketplace.
Julie Su, current Deputy Secretary of Labor, is President Biden's nominee for the full Secretary of Labor job. Biden announced the choice in February after the departure of former Labor Secretary Marty Walsh. But Su has struggled to get the necessary votes for confirmation in a divided Senate. More hearings on that are coming up later this month. Mel Leonore Barkley, a national politics reporter at the 19th, looked back at Sue's days as a labor attorney in the 90s, particularly Sue's role in the landmark El Monte Thai garment slavery case in 1995.
So these were 72 Thai immigrants, mostly women, who were working in sweatshop conditions in El Monte, California. The one worker that I spoke to told me that she was paid between 2 to 4 cents to sew pockets onto garments. She worked in the same place where she lived, really long shifts. The money that she was paid to then use to buy food and toiletries and other essentials from a shop that was run by the same people that ran the sweatshop. The sweatshop really inflated prices. So it really was slave-like conditions. The windows and the doors were boarded up. There were security guards outside, so they were not able to leave. And eventually federal agents were able to release and free these folks from these working conditions.
And what did Julie Su do for them?
So the first thing that Julie Su was able to do was to guarantee their release from an immigration detention center. After they were released, the one worker I spoke to, Nanta, talked about Julie helping her find a new job, and it was a job where she stayed at for 11 years, also sewing. And then that's where this landmark case really starts. Julie worked with these workers to figure out how to guarantee back wages for them. And Julie built a case that not only held responsible the people that were running the sweatshop, but also all of the businesses up and down the line that were benefiting from their work.
What does Julie Su's role in all of this tell us about her views and how she might do her job if confirmed as labor secretary?
She wrote an essay in 2021 about the Almonte case, and in that essay she talks about watching her parents, who are both Chinese immigrants, arrive in this country and, try to navigate work, having limited English and feeling that a lot of employers are predatory. She has talked about that being an inspiration for her to advocate for vulnerable workers, and people who support her to be in this position say that that passion could, at this really high level in the federal government, could just be an advocate for the most vulnerable workers in America. And they really believe that that voice is really necessary right now within the Labor Department.
Why do you think Biden is picking someone like Sue right now?
I think one really interesting thing about this story is that the same folks who are advocating for Julie Su to lead the Labor Department right now were doing the same when the president was first elected. And he ultimately went with a different labor secretary, and they feel that just her time is due. But at the same time, the country after the pandemic is in a really interesting place when it comes to workers in the service industry and the lowest paid workers. I spoke to one advocate who said that a lot of workers, especially in the restaurant industry, are walking off the job just demanding better wages. And she feels that the pandemic empowered these workers to do that. She believes that there is this really crucial moment of opportunity, and that somebody like Julie Su, who is interested in these kinds of workers, could help the administration seize this opportunity and help increase wages and benefits for workers.
So who is against her confirmation and why?
The opposition is really centered on business groups. They believe that she is somebody who would be hostile to small businesses. Right now, the Labor Department is working through 2 different rules that would impact businesses and that are being debated, and they just believe that the perspective that she brings to the job would harm their efforts.
How is Sue and how is the Biden administration responding to those concerns?
Well, I spoke to one Sue supporter who said that Julie Su is not hostile to business. She believes in uplifting businesses who take the high road and who treat their workers fairly and who pay fair wages. And so I think to them, if you are a business that is doing right by their workers, Julie Su shouldn't worry you is I think the first priority.
Mel Leonore Barkley is a national politics reporter for the 19th. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up,
I've also written about 6 or 7 Christmas orders already.
It's never too early, right? But first, let's do the numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 2 points, just a tad, to end at 33,485. The Nasdaq was up 91 points, 0.75%, to close at 12,087. The S&P 500 grew 14 points, 0.3%, to finish at 4105. Justin Ho was telling us about the availability of credit almost a month after the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Wells Fargo picked up 2.7% after an upgrade from Raymond James, who said it believes the bank will benefit from recent turmoil in the banking sector. Bank of America moved up 0.7%. Bond prices fell slightly. The yield on the 10-year T-note remains at 3.30%. And you're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Domo, the data experience platform innovator that unites IT's need for governance and business users' need for access. With Domo, companies get agile data experiences that spark the curiosity that underpins business impact. More at domo.com. And by Baird, dedicated to attracting and retaining talent from across the financial industry, providing continuity for clients. More at BairdDifference.com.
WNYC supporters include Brooklyn Solar Works, a Brooklyn-based solar design and installation firm bringing clean energy to homes in New York City. More information is available at brooklynsolarworks.com or 347-377-2705.
One more time. As one half of the electronic music duo Daft Punk, Thomas Bangalter says he found creative tension in contrasts and oppositions.
Very sweet things and very violent things, going from one thing to another.
Now Bangalter brings that tension to orchestral works on the next morning edition from NPR News.
Weekday mornings on WNYC.
At home or out and about, you're never too far from your mobile phone, which means you're never too far from WNYC. Live stream your favorite shows anytime. Just go to your browser and type in WNYC.org.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kimberly Adams. As recently as 2020, 18% of people living on tribal lands had no possible way to sign up for broadband internet service, according to the American Indian Policy Institute. And that compares with just 4% of folks in the rest of the country who have this issue. The federal government allocated $3 billion in the bipartisan infrastructure law for increasing connectivity in Native communities on top of earlier pandemic relief funds some tribes are using to invest in broadband projects. But supply chain jams make it hard to get the materials needed to carry out these projects. Skilled labor is in short supply, and there's lots of competition to secure both. So, as Marketplace's Savannah Marr reports, putting all that money to work has been tough.
It's been a little noisy with construction lately at the senior housing complex in Pawhuska, the Osage Nation capital. The payoff for all this racket? Soon the elders who live in these 30 stone-sided duplexes will have some of the fastest internet in Osage County. But there's a lot of work to do. Charla Lockman is here. She's waiting for an excavator to scoop away rocks and dirt so she and other technicians can lay down fiber optic cables.
What we're doing is digging the main line for the fiber to be ran to.
Once they connect these homes, they'll move on to other Osage neighborhoods.
And after we collect the native households, we're going to go into the non-native so that we can communicate from